Hey everyone, this is Ari Witten and welcome back to the Energy Blueprint podcast. Today I have with me a special guest, a good friend of mine for the second time. His name is Alex Viada and he is a beast of a human being. He's probably one of the fittest people on the planet, pretty much a freak of nature in terms of fitness. He's participated and completed, I'm going to read you his official bio here and then I have some personal words to share. So he's participated and completed in nearly every sport imaginable, with some with greater success than others, being dragged to his first swim meet when he was 4 years old. He's coached over 300 athletes of all ages and levels in sports ranging from bodybuilding to ultra running to triathlon to cycling to powerlifting. He's also prepared close to 40 individuals for Ranger School, for SEALs training and BUDS, and other selective military programs. His hybrid training method is simple. It consists of breaking down the demands and unique stressors of every type of training for every type of athlete that each athlete requires, and programming their program to target specific demands rather than labels like strength training or conditioning or endurance training, etc. The result is a style of programming that has produced a significant number of powerlifting triathletes and 300 plus pound runners. Wow. Many athletes working with Complete Human Performance, which is the company that Alex works with, find themselves setting personal records and strength, speed, and distance at the same time, something that was traditionally seen as impossible. So I want to welcome Alex to the show for the second time. Welcome.
All right, thank you so much. Really, really glad to be chatting with you again.
Yeah, I want to start with a personal note, which is that I want to say to everybody listening that you have actually been one of my absolute favorite podcast interviews that I've ever done. And I really appreciate the way your brain thinks about these issues. And having interviewed, well over 100 health experts, I have a good sense of this, and I have a good sense of how people's brains operate, and in particular, the psychological flaws that people fall into. In particular, like some people become, sort of slaves to their own beliefs and dogmas and preconceived notions, and, end up sort of cherry picking the research and blinding themselves to all the evidence that conflicts with their views. Or just, 20 years ago, they came up with a system and they are convinced that their system works best, and they just haven't even bothered to look at the scientific literature in the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. Or they just they're a part of a particular cult, whether it's evidence-based fitness or whether it's allopathic medicine or whether it's functional medicine. They're part of a sort of a group think, where their particular community of people may have certain myths and preconceived ideas and belief systems, and they just adopt those belief systems without even necessarily realizing what's going on, and they have so many blind spots and they're not even able to see them. What I really appreciate about you, and I think that I also, strive to do this, and I see it very, very strongly in you as a good example of somebody who does this extremely well. You are a truly free thinker, and you're part of certain communities, but you're not afraid to question certain ideas and go explore the literature and say, hey, I think the science says this, even when it's not popular, even when you're pissing people off. So I just really appreciate the commitment to the truth and commitment to the evidence that you bring to things. And I just want to say on a personal note that I think you are a extremely knowledgeable, brilliant guy, and I'm excited to have you on the show for a second time.
No, thank you so much. And kind of hearing that and hearing that that's the perception is that means everything, because my whole thing has always been, you don't have to be the guy with the answer, but you need to be the person who knows how to find the answer. And I think so much of this and so much of this approach has come from a lifetime of honestly dabbling in so many things, but really wanting to get to the heart of it. Spending a lot of time after school working in EMS, and, worked briefly at a mechanics, and, finding that everybody out there, regardless of their belief system, knows something and has thought about something in greater detail than you. And having the humility to step back and say, okay, what's the quality in this here? What's the quality in their perspective? What's the quality in their viewpoint they're rational human beings to some extent, even if they're, complete advocates or fanatics or anything else. There's some logical quality that keeps them coming back. And how can I approach that with humility and get them to let me tease out what that quality is and use that to, kind of develop my own belief set from it. And that's been what I strive for. That's exactly what I sense you strive for. That's, I think in many ways related to a topic I think you and I were going to chat a little bit about today.
Yes. Yeah, actually. So before we get into that, one thing I want to say to everybody listening, make sure that if you haven't already, go listen to the first podcast that I did with Alex. Really a phenomenal episode, one of my personal favorite episodes that I've ever done, and has amazing feedback from everybody who listened to it. And we cover in that episode a lot of sort of Alex's core stuff around his philosophy of exercise for not only for fat loss and muscle gain, but perhaps more importantly, depending on the person, but probably for everybody listening to this podcast, things like energy and longevity and disease prevention. So really a lot of gold nuggets there. Highly recommend listening to that. This is the part 2, which we're going to cover all sorts of really cool topics that I'm excited to get into. So the first one, as you alluded to just a minute ago, is I really want to talk to you about this cult of scientism. And this is something that we've had a few personal interactions on Facebook, and we've been part of debates and sort of seen other people going at these, online debates on certain subjects, whether it's things like, I don't know, organic versus conventional produce. And you can see how these, certain people who are part of certain groups just absolutely, are committed to a certain perspective. And it doesn't matter how much you show them evidence that conflicts with their perspective. They're unwilling to see any truth in any perspective that they didn't already come into it with. And that's true of people on both sides of that debate, and many other examples of topics that we could get into. But so what is this cult of scientism all about from your perspective?
I think it's going back to what you said before, how you have people who are fanatics for their belief system. And, we all suffer from confirmation bias. We all love heralding anything that supports our viewpoints, and we don't really turn a critical eye on anything until it conflicts with it. And, you'll see these online discussions or even discussions in person between two professionals. And, they'll each come up with a study or a bit of research or a case study to bolster their point. And they present that case study with very little scrutiny. And when presented with a case study or piece of evidence that conflicts with their viewpoint, they immediately start looking, the sample size is off, this method of analysis was off, and they pick it apart with this fine-tooth comb. And this is so antithetical to science itself. Science is a way of answering questions. It's not the answer. Science itself is never the answer. It is a method by which you can take a question you have and hopefully find the answer to it. It doesn't tell you what questions to ask. It doesn't tell you what to do with the answers. It just gives you the answer to a question you're currently asking. That's what research does. That's what studies do. And that's, science is very much about approaching everything with that humility and approaching the results with as impartial an eye as possible. I think what's happened in this field, and the pendulum swings back and forth so much, but health, fitness, wellness, longevity, there is it's still the Wild West out there. If you have an idea, you can promote it, you can find something to back it up, and you can sell it. And I think the research and evidence-based perspective was kind of a needed check when it first started coming out. And people said, okay, you're making this claim. Let's see let's see what the science actually says about that. Let's see what the research actually says about it. So it's led to this sort of skepticism about everything, which is great. But it's led to what I like to call an uncharitable skepticism. I think you should apply the lens of charitable skepticism when people offer something forward. And this uncharitable skepticism is almost used as kind of a weapon, I think, by those who don't understand the purpose of science. they're presented with an idea that challenges them, that may be more complex than they're used to, or that may conflict with something that they learned in high school biology 20 years ago, or it may conflict with what their evidence-based idol is currently saying in a clever infographic on social media. And so they reject it. And they reject it without giving it its proper due. Without the rejection comes without actual scientific rigor. And that, to me, is what scientism is using the label of science and being scientific and being evidence-based to be equally as fanatic and frankly ignorant about dismissing new ideas and dismissing innovation. And very often this desire to be right vastly outweighs the desire to actually find the truth. And I think in a field where, I always say that, medicine was never about, okay, let me design a study. Back in the day, the quote with medicine would be like, hey, hold my beer. People would try things. People would try insane things. You look at the history of medicine and vaccines and everything else. I mean, what is it? Was it yellow fever, where this researcher was taking, fluids from a sick patient and pouring it in his eyes to demonstrate contagion. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that science has always been about, is innovation and trying new things and questioning current belief. And that's missing. Yeah. And I think it's been replaced with this skepticism that's almost born of fear and its own sort of tribalism. And I see it so often, and I really think it does a disservice to this evidence-based community.
Yeah, extremely well said. That was more eloquent than I could have ever said it. I want to go a little deeper into certain aspects of this. Mm-hmm. The way I see it, there's almost two sort of camps that we have going on right now. And one camp is, people who are genuinely scientifically illiterate and or just scientifically ignorant, or don't care about the science, or mm-hmm. don't understand that maybe their sort of camp that they're in, maybe they're Ray Peat, cultist, mm-hmm. or some other particular, there are carnivore diet fans or whatever other diet camp, mm-hmm. and they're following a particular guru or set of gurus, and they're getting spoon-fed this cherry-picked mm-hmm. sort of funnel of research. If they're seeing any research at all, it's most likely cherry-picked. Mm-hmm. And so you have this camp of people who are either in the realm of pure pseudoscience or completely misrepresented cherry-picked science, mm-hmm. and have no real conception that they're not operating in sort of a full picture of the body of evidence. And then on the other side, you have the evidence-based camp, the hardcore evidence-based, like if there isn't a study directly testing that specific nuance of that specific thing, then it's nonsense and pseudoscience. And they're willing to rush to brush off everything as pseudoscience that hasn't already been explicitly tested and explicitly proven. Mm-hmm. And then I think, so it's really like there's this vast territory in the middle that very few people seem to be in, which is a commitment to going wherever the evidence goes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like if there's a study coming out, or a body of evidence, a body of studies that come out that are really well-designed studies on a topic that I've speculated on, and that these new studies clearly show that I'm wrong, I'm happy to accept that I was wrong, and I'm happy to publicly acknowledge that I was mm-hmm. wrong. And say, hey guys, I publicly speculated this in the past, but turns out really good evidence suggests it's this, this, and this. And I know you're exactly the same way. But why do you think there are so few people who are putting their commitment to going wherever the evidence is ahead of, their preconceived notions and their belief systems?
I think obviously a huge amount of it is fear. I don't want to say a lot of it comes, look no further than politics, where if somebody changes their mind on a critical key issue, they're seen as wishy-washy or flip-flopping or anything else, saying, hey, I've changed my mind on this, I was wrong. I think the concern, especially among individuals now who view themselves in some degree in the public eye or seen as authorities, their concern is if they admit that they were wrong, they will lose confidence in those who they believe hang on their every word because of this illusory sort of confidence. I mean, if I have everybody listening to me and I have this imposter syndrome going, I don't actually think I know all that much, but they all seem to think so. So I need to keep impressing them. If I say, oh my gosh, I was wrong on this. Oh, I worried I was wrong all the time. Now they're going to think I'm wrong too. And it becomes this fear that it'll undermine confidence. And it of course, you know, as you know, you've seen the times you admit you're wrong. When you say, I've changed my mind on this, people enjoy that. They love that. They think, okay, I can follow what you say, because if the evidence says otherwise, you are more concerned with giving me the correct answer than being seen as this all-knowing oracle. Yeah. I can trust you. You're moving. You're not just steering the ship in one direction and blasting through icebergs. You're actually going to navigate this for me, and I can just trust what you have to say because you don't have an agenda. But I think as we get, you know, you talk about those two camps and the super evidence-based, and I think their mission has almost become disagreeing with everything the other camp says. And you get that sort of tribal, okay, this is our view. We are as fanatic about our evidence-based view as you are about the other things. So if I say detoxes don't work and your liver and kidneys do all the detoxes you need, and you point out that in fact, you know, vitamin C and ascorbic acid can help neutralize phytic acid and can actually help in, you know, iron absorption in food. And oh my gosh, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? Suddenly all these things, I can't accept that. There can't possibly be any quality from that camp there to listen to.
Yeah, and this is one of the ironies of that position, right? It's like you're so fearful of the possibility that you could be wrong that you feel this need to cherry pick, or what you talked about before, which is that any study which supports your preconceived notions, you're going to put it forth and present it to your followers without a skeptical eye. But then any study that conflicts with it, you're going to go spend 2 hours nitpicking all the methodological details of it and saying why you think the researchers were biased or didn't do the study properly or something like that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's that. So the irony is that these people are so fearful of being wrong that they're doing this, and they're doing it with the fear that if their followers perceive them as being wrong on a certain belief from the past, they're going to lose trust. But the irony is that people do lose trust over time as they start to encounter the evidence that opposes your perspective anyway.
Exactly.
So the last thing I want to mention here that's a pretty cool thing I saw recently is, do you follow Chris Masterjohn at all?
I do.
Yeah. So he published this little meme recently called, I think it was called Evidence-Based Trolls or Evidence-Based Science. Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
So he coined this term, which is basically talking about, you know, some of the same things that we've just been talking about, which is within the evidence-based community, they are so intensely committed to, you know, this idea that if it hasn't been explicitly tested, that specific nuance of that specific thing, there isn't a randomized controlled study on that specific topic, then it doesn't exist and it's nonsense and pseudoscience. And they don't have an appreciation for, you know, the real experts out there who have a vast body of knowledge, of research and of physiology and of biochemistry that they've accumulated over years and years and years and decades, and who can understand how the body works and then goes just beyond whatever the current state of the evidence is to do some logical speculation based on the existing evidence and say, here, you know, based on what is known in the current body of evidence, I think it will be likely that this and this will also be true.
Yep.
And so they react to any, you know, you have these like 18-year-old personal trainers who have been reading studies for 6 months, who are reacting to those people, you know, with a huge body of knowledge, doing that sort of logical speculation with this, oh, you know, that's nonsense. You know, that I haven't seen any study testing that. Can you cite a study that proves that? And then if you can't, then they say, oh, you're a quack, you're a pseudoscience. And it's this great irony that you have these people who are just massively ignorant talking to very knowledgeable people and thinking that they're quacks.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and I've certainly done a lot of investigations over the last couple of years, and coming from a pharma background where pharma is all about all these small biotechs that come up with some crazy idea or find some mechanism, and they say, oh, let's investigate this. This could be an interesting. This stuff is out of left field, and you see the wildest herbs, and they look to folk remedies. They look for things that people have been doing for thousands of years, and they say, oh, well, there seems to be some historical efficacy to this. Let's investigate this herb. Let's investigate this plant. And they investigate it, and they find that there are 30 different active, different alkaloids in it, and some of them have this effect, and then they go down the rabbit hole even further, and they find that this historical what would seem to be pseudoscience suddenly has some deeper, highly scientific quality to it that may not have been studied just yet, but the mechanism is there, the science is there, and it goes very deep, but it just gets dismissed outright by those who kind of they want to be able to dismiss everything.
Yeah, but the way science progresses is through exactly this sort of logical speculation. Somebody has a body of knowledge, and then they create some bit of logical speculation and a theory based on the body of knowledge, and then you go test it. And see if it's right.
Yeah.
And, hopefully you take an attitude of, hey, if it's right, awesome, my theory was right. And if it's not right, cool, I get to discard it and move on to a better theory.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I would love to continue this line of conversation. I'm having a lot of fun with it, but let's move on to some specific topics. So you have a Patreon, I don't know what the proper word for it, a Patreon account, or?
I'm not sure what it is either. We'll go with account. That sounds good.
Basically, you post content there, and in exchange for people who donate like $5 or $15 a month. Yeah. And I'm one of the donators. I donate $15 a month. You post content on a variety of topics, whether fitness and health-related topics, and you dig deep in the literature. And then basically just communicate your findings in these very fun, engaging, short videos. So you've got a wide variety of different topics there. I want to kind of go rapid fire through a number of these things so people can get a sense of your take on a bunch of specific subjects. So let's start with CBD, which is it's a cool topic and actually speaks to what we've been talking about, which is the fact that you are open to going where the evidence goes. You came in with certain preconceived ideas, and actually looking at the research changed some of your view.
Yeah, with CBD was one of those things where 3-4 years ago even I looked at it and said, this is ridiculous. It's being talked about being everything from a cure to cancer to this great alternative to opioids and painkillers. And I said, what, this is just too much. This is the claims being made by this is absurd. CBD oil is a great excuse for a lot of people, a lot of potheads to just get more weed. And what was really interesting is part of what made me lucky was coming here to San Diego and realizing that UCSD actually has some of the leading researchers in CBD in the country. And it's investigating that topic. I got asked about it, and I went in legitimately thinking this is going to be a crock. There's not going to be anything here worthwhile. And the deeper I dug into it and looking at the actual biochemical pathways involved, and looking at how it engages in anti-inflammatory action, and looking how it engages in kind of the anti-nociceptive action, and looking at the different ways that it binds to these receptors and the possibilities of the compound, I just became more and more impressed, and said there's a lot of possibilities here, and being used as a sleep aid. And then of course, when you're being asked about a topic like this, and that you're speaking to an unknown audience, some of whom may be very well versed in this topic, if you're answering the question for them, you can't just say, it's stupid. You can't say, oh, well, it's good for sleep, or it's not good for sleep. You have to look into it and say, well, okay, it's good for sleep, but I heard rumors that it messes up your REM sleep. So you start looking at that, and you look at the effect on sleep architecture and find that it has no difference in sleep architecture, which was one of the concerns. Is CBD good as a sleep aid? Well, yes, it doesn't interrupt REM sleep or anything like that. So I was consistently finding that, in fact, a lot of the claims made about it were very true. And in fact, it's being looked at and being developed into an alternative for opioids and long-term chronic pain, and as a sleep aid and as an anti-anxiolytic. And the things you have to bear in mind is it's all dose dependent. You take too much as it increases anxiety. A small amount doesn't do anything. A little bit actually decreases pain and decreases inflammation. Too much has the opposite effect. So you look into it and you realize that, I'm, as it stands now, a big fan of the compound and a big fan of the research that's being done on it, and really think that the possibilities are tremendous. I mean, even as an anti-cancer compound, the more I looked into that and its properties as a PPAR delta agonist and seeing what that could do to certain kinds of cancer and certain tumor lines and slow proliferation of certain kinds of breast cancer. And you look at that and you go, wow, there's possibilities here. And, a classic example of something I dismissed, and I think a lot of the community that I was part of it dismissed, and as I investigated it, found a lot of the claims made had a very solid backing.
So yeah, like the whole topic of CBD is an example. Yeah.
Yeah.
So say a bit more about the sleep thing, because I am seeing quite a few people saying that CBD enhances their deep sleep. Have you seen any evidence to indicate that?
So what I've seen generally with CBD is, yes, it can enhance your deep sleep. The biggest question, first of all, the amount of THC in the compound matters. Too much, no THC whatsoever apparently hasn't been well studied. Too much actually does decrease your deep sleep and you spend more time in REM sleep. But with that proper dose, which is, kind of still TBD, what it does is it eliminates or it reduces the amount of wake cycles, but otherwise it keeps your overall sleep architecture just about the same. And the result that I've seen is anywhere from, when you talk about deep sleep and say an 8-hour night, you talk about 2 to 2.5 hours of truly deep wave sleep, and saying that people who take it experience more like 2.5 to 3 hours of deep wave sleep rather than 1 to 1.5 that you typically see with more interrupted sleep. That's, signs of background anxiety, etc. So in that regard, absolutely, it does seem to improve sleep quality in that regard. And like I said, the lack of negative effects on overall ratio of REM to deep sleep was remarkable.
Yeah. So a couple other contexts here. Pain is one, and then anxiety. What's your take on the literature as far as CBD and pain and anxiety?
Well, for pain, so pain is one of the interesting ones, and that's one of the chief areas that's being investigated is, again, kind of the medium amounts of it. And what's interesting is when you talk about pain, a lot of people in pain management talk about two kinds of pain. Basically the experience of pain, kind of the emotional, like I want to avoid pain side of things, and then the actual visceral, the nociceptive side of pain. Certain painkillers block one, very few block both. Only opioids block both. So you talk about something like you take a bunch of ibuprofen, you're not going to suddenly dull, it doesn't necessarily dull your fear of discomfort. It doesn't dull the emotional reaction to pain. It just dulls somewhat the ache and the visceral feeling of pain. Opioids block both. That's one of the reasons why they're so tremendously effective. I think it's called lateral and medial pain, or I think that's the term. And what's interesting about CBD and THC is they also block both. And so for chronic pain patients whose lifestyles are not just inhibited by the actual physical discomfort, but are also inhibited by the psychological effects of pain and pain anticipation. Phantom limb pain is one major area it's been investigated, where the perception that there is a limb there, or the perception that there is discomfort in the residual limb is very limiting to lifestyle. CBD is one of the only compounds outside of the opioid family of drugs that can be investigated that seems to reduce that. And that is what makes it such a fascinating area of inquiry for chronic pain patients, people dealing with discomfort, is reducing both kinds of pain dramatically increases as far as lifestyle management, dramatically increases the chances of these individuals leading a productive, active life and resuming normal activity or increasing activity level, et cetera.
Very interesting. And what about anxiety?
Anxiety is a challenging one, because anxiety is one area where I don't think we're quite ready to use CBD on a large scale for anxiety, because the THC constituent of it is very, very critical to dial in. You get this kind of, I would say, U shape with regards to your anxiety and the dosage you take. Very little and it has no effect. And again, too much, and it actually seems to increase it. And so titrating the effect of CBD on anxiety with the amount of THC is very critical. And I think some people report that CBD made anxiety worse or makes it hard for them to go to sleep, for example. And a lot of that has to do with titrating the amount of THC and et cetera in it. So in terms of anxiety management, it's a very, very promising compound, but that is something that either takes significant self-experimentation or we really will have to do significant research and get more data on the exact amount of each constituent to really be able to manage it. Some people take it and right away say, you know what, it absolutely improved it. It reduced some of the peripheral sensations of anxiety, the sympathetic response and all of that. And so that's there. But, again, we're coming back to an area where it's like, okay, we really got to take baby steps here because it can make it worse for some people.
Yeah. Interesting. What is your, actually, I just want to flag something. You said a minute ago that the proper dose is TBD, which I think is pretty funny in the context of CBD.
Think of that.
But speaking of dose, I know there's a lot of studies kind of all over the place with dose. Some of the sleep studies, I believe, have used like close to 100 milligrams of CBD, which is interesting when you consider like a lot of the common pills that are being sold in the market have like 5 milligrams per pill. So people don't realize that to get to the proper dose or a dose that would approximate what the research used, get that benefit, they would literally have to take like 20 pills at one.
Exactly.
So do you have any thoughts on dose range? What might be optimal, like, and not a specific number, but maybe a range?
Yeah, I mean, exactly it. I mean, for those sleep studies, the dose is always, as one pain management physician put it, is always more than you think, but less than you probably want. And I think the dose for sleep was about 25 to 100 was the range that they said to kind of titrate in at 25 milligrams to 100 milligrams or along those lines. And, again, so much is determined on the method of administration, the quality of what you're getting. That's a big concern, is that many of those gummies and everything else that if they don't have a hemp smell to them, they're probably not as high in CBD as you might think. But yeah, it's a tremendous range. And some of these physicians, when they actually prescribe it, even though prescribing CBD is kind of you're not really supposed to do it. Even though that there's such a range that they will give, and the physician himself will write 20 milligrams to 100 milligrams and, titrate as needed. So again, that's very individual, but yes, it's always significantly more than you'll usually find in those commercial preparations and single pills.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I want to talk now about one of my personal favorite topics, which is adrenal fatigue. And I know that you did another one on this topic. So tell me about your take on the whole concept of adrenal fatigue.
So my general take on it was basically when people confuse it with kind of adrenal insufficiency. And, when people talk about the idea that your adrenals will eventually lower their output in regards to, kind of a chronic stress, and in reality, the opposite tends to be the case. And what, talking about adrenal insufficiency being an actual condition and what adrenal insufficiency means, and then looking at the mechanisms by which adrenal fatigue is purported to take place, which is, chronic overproduction in the adrenal glands and the adrenal medulla, and realizing that it's actually an upregulation, it makes me, the problem with the adrenal fatigue diagnosis is that if you are under the circumstances that you think a chronic high levels of stress, it's not going to have the effect that adrenal fatigue as a condition would state. And, when I talk to, physicians about adrenal insufficiency and, all the diseases associated with that, it's a completely different presentation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm curious, as this has come up quite a bit when talking about chronic fatigue.
Did you see my recent review of the literature on this topic? I did a really comprehensive review of the literature. Did you see it?
I did not get a chance to dig into it yet.
You got to see it. Well,
I do.
Basically, I did I literally spent months on this.
Yeah.
So I've done two big pieces on this topic. One is I'm gonna give the super brief overview of this.
Sure.
It was months of my life. One is the link between adrenal function, cortisol levels, and the fatigue conditions specifically. So to see if there's any clear link between, stress-related exhaustion, burnout syndrome, vital exhaustion. There's a few different names of these recognized fatigue syndromes, which is basically synonymous with the general concept of how adrenal fatigue is purported to work, which is chronic stress leads to fatigue and other symptoms. That part is absolutely real and unquestionable. And then chronic fatigue syndrome. So there's a few different sort of recognized fatigue syndromes. But a lot of people don't know is that there's 25 years of research of researchers all over the world examining adrenal function, HPA axis functioning, cortisol levels through all kinds of different ways, salivary measurements, urinary measurements, blood measurements, in people with these fatigue syndromes, and then comparing the levels of cortisol compared to normal, healthy people without fatigue. Overwhelmingly, that research shows no clear connection whatsoever between cortisol abnormalities and any of the fatigue syndromes. And I mean, specific numbers, 15 out of 100 showed slightly lower, but still normal morning cortisol levels. 11 out of 59 is 15 out of 59 studies. 11 out of 59 showed slightly higher, and 33 out of 59 showed no detectable difference in cortisol whatsoever between people with the fatigue syndromes and normal healthy people. So that was one big piece I did. And then the other one that I just published a week or two ago is looking at the theory of adrenal fatigue more broadly. And specifically what I did is I looked at all these different types of chronic stressors, that like every type of chronic stressor that you could imagine. So everything from different types of psychological stress to chronic pain, to chronic cigarette smoking, to chronic alcohol consumption, to chronic stress from too much work, chronic stress from not being employed, like every conceivable permutation of chronic stress that you can imagine, and even different chronic diseases, chronic neurological diseases, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and so on. And overwhelmingly, almost everything points in the direction of slightly elevated cortisol. Chronic stress leads to slightly increased cortisol. There is no point for almost anything at which this translates into anything that resembles burning out the adrenal glands and resulting in lower cortisol levels. So anyway, just wanted to interject there because this is a particular passion of mine, but I think you found the same exact thing that I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and almost certainly nowhere near as an exhaustive search, but again, you read into it and you think, well, the mechanism doesn't make sense. And you know what I think, and just to kind of back up a little bit, one of the reasons I think it's sometimes unpopular to say adrenal fatigue doesn't exist is I think a lot of individuals who are seeking answers, and you probably know this better than anybody, so I don't even know I'm telling you this, but individuals who are seeking answers, when they find the answer and they find their condition, they find their illness, they almost identify with it. And that identification, I am someone with adrenal fatigue, I am someone with this, that part of their identity, that is their reason why they don't feel human. That is the reason why they don't feel whole. And wanting to identify with it and realizing that they identify with it makes it very difficult to let go. If you say adrenal fatigue doesn't exist, they almost view that in a large way as invalidating their experience and invalidating their pain and invalidating their struggle, which it's not. But I think one of the places a lot of, and I don't want to say the evidence-based type, but we'll throw them under the bus again, where they fall short is by saying, look, I'm not invalidating your experience. I am not saying you are not going through something. I am only questioning that specific diagnosis, not because I want to tell you you don't have anything, not that I want to tell you it's all in your head, but because I say I want to actually find the answer. And this particular answer that you've been given doesn't help us help you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and this is the exact reason that before explaining, I said it's unquestionable that chronic stress does result
Absolutely.
fatigue, exhaustion, other symptoms. So I always tell people in my stuff on this topic, your symptoms are real. I
Absolutely.
want to be clear that I'm not invalidating your symptoms and what you're feeling. That's real. But the theory that those symptoms are being caused by worn out or exhausted or burnt out adrenal glands is absolutely not supported by the evidence. So
Exactly.
the reason this is so important is because if we want to find a solution to this problem, we need to first conceptualize it accurately and actually be trying to fix physiological mechanisms that are actually broken instead of chasing after physiological mechanisms that are not the cause of those symptoms.
Exactly. It's like you're feeling around in the dark and you feel something and you feel fur and you feel a front paw and you feel a tail and you think, it's a rabbit. What if it's a mountain lion? Saying it's a rabbit isn't going to help you. Say, it's a rabbit. I need to give it some carrots. If that's a mountain lion, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Thinking you've identified it and planning out a course of action based on what you think you've identified, when that's not what it really is at all, is going to lead you to waste your time or, if nothing else, make things worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
So I want to get into, I have so many other cool topics here. Let's see, where should I go next? Heart rate variability, I think, is a great one.
That is a great one.
And I have to admit that I'm a fan of heart rate variability testing.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little surprised in watching your video that you're not as much of a fan or not as stoked about it and impressed with the literature as I am. So tell me a little bit more about your take on heart rate variability testing.
I think heart rate variability is fascinating. I think the insights that these minute changes in impulse can give on the overall state of the autonomic nervous system, and by proxy on illness, on fatigue, on endocrine state, on activity level, on heart health, on everything else, I think it's fascinating. And I mean, the potential there is insane. Where it starts to fall short for me is in still some of the devices and the limitations of our current data. Because I think a lot of the research being done on heart rate variability, we have both, basically time domain analysis and frequency analysis.
Actually, you know what, Alex, real quick, there's probably a lot of people listening who are not even familiar with the whole topic of heart rate variability. So can you back up for me? I should have done this myself, but can you do it for me? Maybe
absolutely.
People a broad explanation of what heart rate variability is and what it's, sort of purported to measure and give insight to.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the way I think about it is, your heart, when it's beating, say, 60 beats per minute at rest, that 60 beats per minute doesn't mean one every absolute second. It's not exact. That there is always a variance in how long between beats, even at rest, even at a steady heart rate. And a lot of things can affect that variance. What a lot of people don't know is that if your heart had no input from the rest of your nervous system, it would beat at 100 beats per minute. It is strictly the input of your autonomic nervous system, well, not strictly, is your autonomic nervous system and pressure receptors and everything else that's kind of keeping your heart at its resting heart rate right now. Everything in your body can affect how quickly it beats. And the variability between beats that's keeping it from being exactly 1 second between beats tells you a lot about your overall health. It's basically, and a lot of people like to say that the more responsive your heart rate is, the greater that variability between beats, basically the more relaxed and the more recovered and healthier you are. It's a huge oversimplification. But when people talk about heart rate variability, what they're measuring is the overall variance between beats at rest. A very low variance, where it's very mechanical, and very little variance tends to be a sign of a lot of things. It could be a sign of high stress, a sign of a lot of, even some heart conditions, some illnesses. When variability is relatively high and it's responding very well to minute changes in your body, that's usually seen as a sign that you're well recovered. Your autonomic nervous system, your parasympathetic system is healthy and engaged. So that's basically what it is that variance between beats. And what's very interesting is a lot of the data, when the way they analyze it is, you can do kind of short-term analysis. You can say, okay, for the next minute, we're going to collect every beat and see how long between beats and take the average of that variance and give that a number. Like this beat is, your 0.9 seconds here, your 1.1 seconds here, 0.9 here, 1. The average variability is 0.1 seconds, or whatever, as an example. and say, okay, that's your average variance. If the next day it's only 0.05, oh, well, that's probably a sign that, you know, you're stressed, you've been training too much, you didn't sleep too well. Again, as a gross oversimplification, but that's kind of the idea. And so it has a lot of predictive value, I think, for a lot of individuals. But the difficult thing is it really in measuring those beats precisely. And I think that's where my issue with it came in, is that when people want to use heart rate variability for themselves, because you can use it in hospitals. In fact, a lot of people who are in hospitals hooked up to, you know, 12 lead EKGs right after heart surgery, heart rate variability very accurately predicts individuals who are going to have complications. A sudden drop in that variability in these cardiac patients, and that's a red flag. People say, okay, you know, this, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so there's good research, you know,
Absolutely.
from everything from that kind of scenario, even to elite athletes using this
Absolutely.
as a form of, you know, helping them regulate whether to work out hard that day or take an easy day. So
Yeah.
like I said, I've been mostly pretty impressed with the research on this.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where I don't want to quite be misunderstood, is the research is great. There is a lot of data on it, and there's a lot of work being done in analyzing patterns of variances, and you talk about low frequency, you know, basically looking at how a lot of this data from, you know, patients in hospitals and athletes, et cetera, corresponds to known conditions. And we're putting together a big database of this stuff, and a lot of these companies are putting together big databases. The difficult thing for me is a lot of the devices people use to measure it are not super accurate.
And specifically on this, I want to mention on a personal note, I was using a device that is a finger pulse sensor that has a particular plug and a sensor that plugs into my phone and is designed to measure heart rate variability. In a conversation with you, actually, you educated me on something that I was not aware of, which is that there's a difference between true heart rate variability and something called pulse rate variability, which I've not heard of before.
Yeah.
And that specifically, and especially in certain populations, like young, healthy athletes being one of them, and very fit, very muscular people, pulse rate variability is not going to be a very accurate reflection of true heart rate variability. So the research is really on heart rate variability, but there are all these devices on the market that are really measuring pulse rate variability, is potentially not very accurate. And specifically, I was also considering getting an Aura ring at that, which you basically talked me out of, not intentionally, but you know, because you educated me on this topic of pulse rate variability. So talk about the difference between heart rate variability versus pulse rate variability.
Sure, yeah, because when we look at heart rate variability, what heart rate variability is actually looking at is the electrical impulse from, you know, between nodes in the heart. It is an actual measurement of electrical, it's a depolarization. It's like looking at when the switch turns on. What these devices do, typically you'll find them on your wrist, like this garment I happen to be wearing, or the Oura ring or anything else, what those are measuring is the actual pulses of blood coming through the body. Now, the difference between that is heart rate variability is an electrical impulse. It's instantaneous. It instantly, the autonomic nervous system and the studies done on using this autonomic input, this nervous system electrical input and electrical hormonal input on the heart, all of that data is on the effect on the electrical impulse, on that depolarization. You take the inputs of the nervous system and it affects that polarization and how often that switch is going off and on. When you look at pulse rate, that is a downstream effect. Once that impulse goes through the heart and propagates and you get the ventricle contracting and you get the blood getting pushed through all the various vessels and out to the extremities, it's measuring the net result of that, which is the actual pulse. Now, if you think about one being the electrical input and the other being the downstream mechanical output, you suddenly see, wait a minute, there's a lot of steps in between there and a lot of other things that can affect that. The first thing is, right now, there are studies being done that are trying to validate this pulse rate variability, which is heart rate variability measured by the distance, the difference in time between pulses, trying to validate that against electrical impulses. Because if you think about it, you like to think, oh, it's the same thing. When the pulse goes off, your heart contracts and the pulse goes. But first of all, there's a lot of distance between the two. And things like back pressure, vascular back pressure can affect that. You know, the overall health of your your blood vessels, the size of your muscles, the position of your hand at the time. If your hand is higher or lower, or, even when you're breathing, a lot of these things affect how blood perfuses and can mask or add data interference to that heart rate variability. So for relatively sedentary people who are not tremendously active, there's a pretty good correlation between the two. But for people who are either very, very sick, very, very old, or active, the correlation was much, much, much lower. So it's the kind of thing where heart rate variability is still the gold standard, and it's very interesting stuff. Using pulse rate variability, you're not going to get as accurate a reading. Now, there's the argument, well, I can wear this all day. I'm going to get lots of good data from it. Well, lots of bad data and lots of sloppy data, 30 bad data sets don't equate to one good data set. So getting one good data set from an electrical, like chest strap measurement, first thing when you get up in the morning is going to give you one piece of very, very good data. Wearing an all-day device that may be taking your pulse rate variability when you're swinging your arm around, or maybe taking it when you're sitting back and slouched, and you're not getting apples to apples comparisons, may just give you a whole bunch of not very good data. Yeah. Is it still going to give you some idea? Yes, but is it going to be as accurate? No.
And that's the reason that I got myself one of these.
Excellent. That's the standard right there. And that's first thing in the morning, same condition, same position, and everything else. That's going to give you that either 1 minute or 5 minute window where it's going to collect that data. It's going to collect that R to R, the electrical impulses, and you're going to get the most high quality, validated against itself, consistent data set you possibly can.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you finish what you were saying.
I was going to say, because that's my issue with it, is not that it's not very, very interesting research, but that I think the potential for collecting data incorrectly is high enough that you have to say, okay, it needs to be done under these parameters.
Right.
So that's where I come from on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also actually want to say that I just got myself a Garmin Vivo Smart 4, which is like a wristband.
Yeah.
Not as expensive as the one that you have. I'm not going to measure all activity and GPS and like the fancy one that you have, mm-hmm. But it had a couple measurements. One was based on pulse rate variability. They say HRV, but it's actually pulse rate variability. And they had like a stress level and a body battery detection sort of measurement. And I was actually really excited to get it, to be honest with you. I thought it was going to get all this really good data. Yeah. And I just found it kind of mostly meaningless data. Like I didn't find it accurate. I didn't find it insightful. Mm-hmm. And I find that taking the morning heart rate variability test with the chest strap in a really accurate way takes mm-hmm. 2 minutes to do, or 3 minutes, or whatever it is. Every morning at the same time, you get that one data point.
Yep.
Then I know, okay, how hard can I push in my workouts today? And how much, or maybe I need to take the day off, or, and how did I sleep enough last night, and so on. With that in mind, I don't know if we explicitly stated this, but I would love if you could kind of, we've talked about how it applies to athletes in that example, but could you talk a bit about how this might be used for people with, regular people who are not athletes, maybe not even doing much exercise, mm-hmm. but maybe struggling with chronic fatigue, and especially people with chronic fatigue syndrome who are known to go in cycles of boom and bust, basically.
Yeah.
When they're feeling good, they have a tendency to really overdo it, and then like a big crash, and then they're incapacitated for a few days and their condition worsens. So this is why I'm a fan of heart rate variability, is because I think it's not only good for people like me, but for training purposes, but for also people with fatigue, mm-hmm. to help them get an objective measure of how to self-regulate their energy, so that they can avoid the boom and bust cycle.
Yeah. And I think what's so great about HRV in that regard is that it's taking all this, all of these inputs together and kind of giving you kind of a weighted average. And, there have been days, because I went through a number of cycles myself where I used the regular daily measurements. You can feel great, but your heart rate variability can be terrible. And your body is always compensating, and your body is always doing what it needs to get through the day for the most part. And what's interesting is HRV readings can precede a sudden drop off. You can feel fantastic, but your HRV will tell you, you feel fantastic right now because your system is compensating for an overall high level of fatigue. Your system is compensating for a high level of inflammation. You know, the day after a hard run, sometimes I'll feel fantastic. And you can apply this as an example. You know, I may feel fantastic in some ways, but my HRV is in the tank. And what's happening is my system is, your system gets flooded with a number of beta endorphins, and your system is getting overloaded with a lot of these sympathetic outputs to make you feel great and get out of bed. You feel, I could take on everything. And underneath, your HRV is telling you, yes, but that's a compensatory pattern right now.
Yeah,
and
what just popped into my head as you're talking there is like military boot camps. I think there's and I don't know if I've ever seen any research on this, but I know that there's a general sort of feeling towards people go through this very intensely stressful thing for a week or two or however many weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Then they are able to function on this intense physical workload and sleep deprivation
Mm-hmm.
for a time. And then after it's over, tons of people get sick.
Absolutely.
After the stress is done, then they get sick during the rest.
Yep.
So I think it's probably speaks to those sorts of mechanisms that the body can compensate during the stressor.
Absolutely.
Maybe HRV measurements would give some insight into, hey, if you don't stop, you're going to completely overtax us and you're going to pay a price for it.
Well, exactly. Because what the body does when it's under stress, when there's a lot of inflammation, that's, that mu opioid receptor is, getting all this, effects on it that's causing you to feel less pain and less discomfort. Your autonomic nervous system is still crashed. Your hormone levels are still all going in the wrong direction without getting into the specifics. You feel good, but you are feeling good because your body is in effectively this general survival mode to carry about the daily activities. A lot of hormones and a lot of the body's responses to stress are mildly euphoric hormones. Mildly euphoric neurotransmitters to make you not feel your discomfort. And one of the issues that I think a lot of people get into, be they individuals with chronic fatigue or athletes under high training regimens, is when you feel good, you say, I feel good, I want to push it. You may only be feeling good because you're in this compensatory pattern right now. And all that you're going to do by pushing it now is truly put yourself so far in the tank that even those, all those neurotransmitters and that cocktail of feel-good stuff that your body's releasing to keep you going, suddenly that can't even keep up. And then you really crash. And something like HRV that's actually looking at the input of the nervous system, and it's actually looking at cardiac health, and it's actually looking at all these other factors, that's going to really tell you, well, wait a minute, no, this is a really shiny looking exterior and the engine is about to explode.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
I love it. So there's like 10 more topics on this list, but I'm going to try and pick like 2 or 3 good ones here. And do you have are you okay on time? I know we've gone a little bit over. Okay.
Sure.
I won't keep you too much longer, but let's see. I know we need to talk about recovery. One other thing I'd love for you to talk about is BPC 157, peptides. Have you explored the literature on that at all? And, in relationship to, let's just assume everybody listening has never heard of BPC 157 and I'm speaking Chinese. So please explain what that is and what have you found in your review of the literature on it?
BPC 157, it's actually a naturally occurring peptide. And I believe it's a gastric peptide in its derivation. And what it is known for is actually speeding recovery of connective tissue and injury. And its mechanism of action, we don't have to go into the whole details on it. But one of the things I always say when people talk about these peptides is one of the questions is, well, if it's so good, why isn't it marketed? Why isn't this a marketed drug? In fact, it's actually being investigated to be a marketed drug. So BPC 157 is being investigated under the name Bepicin. It is a naturally occurring, orally bioavailable peptide that can have systemic effects on speeding wound healing and injury healing. And in fact, it looks like certain things on connective tissue health and joint health. Fascinating stuff. Again, the mechanisms are a little uncertain, but the literature is very, very promising. And there's still a big question mark as to what the mechanism is. which is again why if you were strictly evidence-based, you could discard it right now and say it doesn't do anything, but it actually does. And it's actually administration and orally dosing BPC 157, or they do intraperitoneal, but for humans, it would be orally dosing it. Orally dosing it does actually appear to speed recovery from injuries and from surgery.
And the reason that's so significant, like there's this whole vast body of all these peptides. I think there's dozens, maybe there's hundreds of them, I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's all these different peptides that are, a lot of them are really gray market. Some of them have been FDA approved drugs for various things. And then others of them are gray market and sort of sold for research purposes only, but there's this whole underground thing going on of doctors who are prescribing this, sending people to compounding pharmacies, and there's peptides for anti-aging, telomerase inhibitors, other anti-aging peptides, nootropic brain boosting peptides, tissue healing peptides like BPC 157, TB 500. What else? Oh, there's like growth hormone mimicking compounds, and there's this whole body of like dozens of these really interesting compounds that many of which have some really impressive research. BPC 157 is really unique for its tissue healing capacities, but it's also one of the few that seems to be orally bioavailable and doesn't have to be injected like the other ones. So what kinds of specific issues might a person have where this BPC 157 might come in handy?
Certain things could be, one of the interesting things it seems to do is when we talk about connective tissue, when we talk about things like cartilage damage or ligament damage and the like, one of the biggest challenges with those areas is that since blood flow is so poor to those areas, healing tends to be very, very slow. BPC 157, what it appears to do, and again, specifics left outside of that, is the growth factors normally responsible for healing and repair and the whole pro-inflammatory then anti-inflammatory cascade. It appears to accelerate that in a lot of these tissues. And what's interesting about that is if you have a knee injury, or if you have chronic knee pain, or if you have an ankle injury, even one that's been a chronic one, something like BPC 157 could theoretically speed both the general healing and facilitate rehabilitation of the injured area much sooner. One of the areas you typically see it prescribed for is things like either anything from, say, a tennis elbow to, bad shoulders, chronic knee pain, sometimes knee pain even as a result of, old injuries acting up and, inflammation of the like. And a lot of people have seen great success with this compound in those indications. And like you said, the fact that it's orally bioavailable is fantastic because people don't want to be sticking themselves with this thing. And in fact, interestingly enough, injecting like actual damaged, so what scientists have actually done is isolated damaged tissue, taken it out of the animal, put it in, say, a dish and put BPC right on it, and it doesn't do anything. So it's obviously a systemic effect, something that's a more centrally mediated, that is responsible for the wound healing and tissue healing effects of it.
Something about the way it interacts with the living system.
Exactly. Whether it is release of some other kind of growth factor or some upstream NTKB or anything else in the inflammatory cascades, something like that. It's doing something, and they can't put their finger on it, but there is enough data to repeatedly show that there is tissue healing impacts from this.
Yeah. One thing I just encountered really recently that is kind of exciting to me, and that I think there's probably going to be more really good research on, is especially since it's orally bioavailable, is the capacity for this compound, which promotes tissue healing, to help regenerate the intestinal tract.
Absolutely.
So not only in people with Crohn's or bowel, but also just sort of more leaky gut ability issues that might have accumulated over years of poor diet or other intestinal issues. I have a feeling, my hunch is that this might turn out to be maybe the most powerful gut healing agent ever.
Absolutely. I mean, that's purportedly one of the purposes of the naturally occurring peptide is actually to help repair and facilitate the repair of various structures in the intestines. So in that regard, that's absolutely fascinating. And, you don't require any special administration. The incidence of side effects seems to be non-existent almost,
Hmm.
which is also what's fascinating.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if I am hoping that this compound, as Bepicin, as the trade name, gets pushed through and actually gets approved, because that'll encourage a lot of repurposing and investigation being done into these other conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two last topics for you.
Sure.
One is frequent feedings and metabolism. So like the old idea that's been around probably since the 80s, maybe the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
that we should eat every 2-3 hours, and that it keeps our sort of metabolic fire stoked and keeps
Mm-hmm.
our metabolism going fast. And what's the relationship, in terms of the actual science, between frequent feedings and our metabolic speed, or how fast our metabolism is?
Almost none whatsoever. The amusing thing is, actually, if you look at a massive meal, the thermic effect of food, which is just the cost to the body, the actual metabolic need, metabolic input into digesting the food, is actually higher for one big meal than multiple small meals. So if you're actually looking at the actual metabolic cost, eating a single big meal is actually going to, quote unquote, speed your metabolism up more than multiple small meals. So there's almost no relationship between the two. Other than that, you sometimes you get arguments made that more frequent feedings are going to give you more steady energy levels, which means your NEAT, your non-exercise activity, that's going to be a little bit higher because you're going to have consistently better energy levels. But when it fundamentally comes down to it, there's never been any proven, and in fact, they're doing all these comparative studies now that are finding no relationship between meal frequency and actual metabolic output.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Nice quick summary. I like it.
yeah,
I have no objections to it. That's exactly what I've done.
yeah,
So the last topic, which is, yeah, I'm sure you could talk about it for hours, but I'll task you with trying to explain it in a relatively succinct way, is recovery. So
yeah.
you're obviously an expert in physical exercise, and you're a pretty extreme athlete. You're an extremely fit guy. I think you're deadlifting 600 pounds or more, or 700 pounds, or some ridiculous number, and you're out there running extremely long distance races at the same time, which is pretty much unheard of. You don't see power lifters and strength athletes who are also extreme endurance athletes. Usually it's one or the other. You're somehow doing both. So you're a freak of nature. So I assume, given that, you probably know a thing or two about recovery. So I would love to hear your thoughts on how you optimize recovery from all the intense exercise you do.
Sure. I mean, the main thing is also, and one thing I wanted to touch on, is that they seem like two completely different things, running and lifting heavy weights. But, what I always tell people when you think about it is, your body doesn't see that you're lifting weights. It doesn't see that you're running. All that your muscles and joints and endocrine system and everything else, all that they see is that you're asking them to do work. All it's seeing is stress. It's seeing impact. It's seeing joint loading. It's seeing tension and tension on the long bones. It's seeing energy needs. Managing those stressors and realizing that not all exercises give the same stress is a major component here. The psychological difference between going out for a long run in the mountains and between pulling a heavy deadlift is very different. And it's part of the whole way we structure training is to teach people that don't think about it as lifting, don't think about it as cardio, just think about all of it as different types of stress, and manage that stress. And look at your training week not as, okay, today I'm lifting 3 days and I'm running this, that. Think about, okay, what is my psychological stress during this week? What days am I under high psychological stress because of my training? What days am I under high psychological stress because of work? How can I make sure that I'm giving myself enough psychological recovery in this week? So that's one component of it. You look at the psychological stress of your whole week and your training week included, and look at your whole lifestyle together and say, okay, is my psychological stress going to be really high? I am lifting a heavy max on Monday, and Tuesday is going to be a really long day at work, and Wednesday I have sprints scheduled and I hate sprints. I'm going from a period of high psychological stress right into something that's very demanding of my psychological energy. Should I space that out? What is my psychological recovery going to be in between there? Should on Wednesday, should I go in for a massage? Should I go in for a sauna session instead of doing this to enable that psychological recovery? Because that's just as important as sore muscles. Mm-hmm. So, and then I break that down and say, okay, let's look at our nervous system here a little bit, you know, kind of related to the same thing. And you say, okay, am I demanding a lot of high power output movements here? And, you know, volume really taxes the nervous system. And, you know, the nervous system output can recover quickly, but certain parts of it take a lot longer. So, and by spreading out the week like that and understanding that every system recovers differently is a critical part of this training. So when I talk about recovery, I talk about the psychological recovery, utilizing everything from, you know, quiet times to borderline sensory deprivation, to even just spending time outside, spending time in the sun, you know, finding things that are kind of negative stressors, or you call it kind of the positive recovery. They fill that recovery bucket psychologically. Then musculoskeletal, and you start to look at different recovery factors there and realize that muscle recovery isn't the same thing as energy systems recovery. For example, a slow walk can be muscular recovery, but it's still burning calories. Mm-hmm. So we look at muscular recovery, and then I look at what I'm doing for it there. Looking at anything from active recovery to looking at things like compression, which can, you know, all again help with maintaining mobility. Looking at a lot of prehabilitation type work on certain days when legs are feeling really sore. And then we look at energy systems recovery, and then we say, okay, I'm doing a lot of work on Sunday. I'm doing a lot of work on Monday. I need to adjust my calories to compensate for that. I want to look at my micronutrients here, look at my, you know, kind of antioxidant state on those 2 days, because there's going to be a lot of stress on my system. So, and it's really hard to condense this down, but that's the general idea, is saying we're not just looking at exercise. We're looking at psychological stress during the week. We're looking at musculoskeletal stress during the week. We're looking at how all these things go together, and we're tracking each one, not just in terms of the training you're doing, but in terms of your lifestyle, in terms of everything else that you're doing, taking all that together and helping each system stay at its peak.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Well done on explaining that, you know, vast and complex topic in record time, probably 7 minutes or something.
Hey, there you go.
Well done. Well, Alex, I have the feeling that we could easily spend 3 more hours talking. But thank you so much for spending a little extra time out of your day with me. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I really appreciate it. I enjoy being able to just kind of touch on, you know, anything that comes to mind. Really.
Yeah, no, this was an unusual style of interview. I don't just normally just throw random topics out there, but you're such a vast body of knowledge on all these random topics that I thought it would be cool to structure the interview like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Alex, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the show again. I had a blast. This was really fun to do this podcast with you, and you're a brilliant guy. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with my audience.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, as always.
Yeah. So where can people find out more about your work or learn more from you? I know that you have the Patreon account set up where you're posting videos on all these different topics, from BPC 157 to turmeric to CBD to, you know, CNS recovery, central nervous system recovery from exercise, and, you know, other fitness and health related topics. Yeah. Where can people find that and sign up? And I also just want to say that this is an amazing opportunity to learn from a guy who is a real expert within fitness and health. For like $5 a month, you can get access to content. So it's really a steal for everybody listening.
Well, the place they can find it, if they have Instagram, just go to alex.viada. That's my Instagram. It's got the link to my Patreon, and I always put up live videos there and give people the chance to, you know, just kind of quickly message in and say, hey, I want to hear about this. And everything goes up there first, then it goes on the Patreon. So if they have that format and want to add me on there, they can find the link to the Patreon and everything else. That's kind of my preferred format. I really like the audience it attracts, and, you know, I kind of like the interactive aspect of it.
Excellent. And then you also have a website where you guys sell training programs and templates for different people. I think it's called CompleteHumanPerformance.com.
That's it. CompleteHumanPerformance.com. You got it.
So talk a little bit about what you guys offer there and are maybe interested in getting something might?
Yeah, we have both templates for a number of different kind of athletic goals. You want to run 5Ks and lift. There's a lot of combinations out there that we have pre-made templates for. Or we also do coaching. We have a series of coaches, all of whom have large, diverse backgrounds in various sports, different conditions. We have a physical therapist on the team, a whole bunch of people from different backgrounds, and that can all do kind of custom coaching. And they just work with you. They see exactly what you want to do. We route you to the appropriate coach or the appropriate, actual expertise in that area, and design custom programs for people.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
One final note I want to say to everybody listening, to be perfectly honest and transparent, not everybody that I have on this podcast is somebody who I'm a fan of, and somebody whose work I think is really accurate and reflective of the evidence, and is doing a good job of portraying the evidence accurately. And so, I generally try to be respectful and not antagonistic of people that I have on the show, and not sort of have everything degenerate into a debate or an argument where somebody's angrily signing off if I object to something that they say. But I want to say that in this case with Alex, he really has my highest recommendation. This is somebody who I think is doing amazing work. I think everybody should be following if you have an interest in fitness or in health, which you should if you're following this podcast. So I really can't recommend him highly enough. I'm personally a fan of his work. And like I said, I donate to his Patreon account so I can get access to, his musings of the day, and really just, I recommend everybody listening do the same. So Alex, thank you again so much. Really enjoyed this, and I hope to do it again with you soon.
All right. Thank you, sir. Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% on board.
Hey there, this is Ari again. One more quick thing before you go. Just make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Energy Blueprint, and also make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or anything else. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and I will see you again next week.